What's up? This is week 2 of goals, where we're talking about, you guessed it, setting and achieving goals. But not just any goals, God-sized goals. We set goals all the time. Finish my homework by 7, make the volleyball team, get my crush to notice me. But after you set a goal, have you ever felt stuck? If you've ever gotten stuck trying to achieve a goal, don't worry. We've all been there, but what matters is how we get unstuck. Did you read this book when you were little? There's a quote in it that I love. A goal without a plan is just a wish. The author seems to know a few things about goals because he was pretty accomplished. He was a writer, a poet, a journalist, and even a pilot. So how did he achieve so much? Was he just exceptionally talented, smart, or lucky? Maybe. Or maybe he knew the power of a well-executed plan. While some of us may be more naturally talented than others in certain areas, we're all capable of accomplishing big things. Whether it's building a Cheerio tower, learning a new skill, or changing the world, God gives us all the ability to solve problems and make things happen. But to accomplish anything, we usually need a plan. So what's a goal that wouldn't be possible without a plan? It might be a spiritual goal, like spending time with God more regularly. Or a mental goal, like learning something new. A physical goal, like trying a new activity or getting stronger or faster. Or a relationship goal, like being a better friend or being kinder to your family. These are all good goals, but without a plan, they're just wishful thinking. So what about you? What's one of your most plan-worthy goals? You can achieve it. If you're not convinced, maybe the next part of Nehemiah's story will help convince you. First, a little recap from last week. We're looking at a book from the Old Testament of the Bible called Nehemiah, written by a guy named Nehemiah. About 140 years before this book was written, the Jewish people were conquered by an enemy army. They destroyed the city of Jerusalem, burned the temple where the Jewish people worshiped God, and sent many of God's people into exile. But God promised that one day, the Jewish people would return. When the book of Nehemiah begins, some of God's people had begun returning to Jerusalem, looking for ways to rebuild what they had lost. But it was a long process. He was passionate about seeing Jerusalem restored, but he saw a problem. Although some of God's people were living in Jerusalem, the city walls were still in shambles. The practical problem. Without walls, God's people would be vulnerable to another attack. The spiritual problem, leaving the walls in shambles dishonored God, but rebuilding them would be a sign that their people were returning to God and choosing to be obedient again. Inspired by his love for his people and his God, Nehemiah set a God-sized goal: rebuild the walls of Jerusalem so God's people would be protected and God would be honored. Nehemiah had a goal, but what about a plan? If you remember from last week in chapter 1, the first thing Nehemiah did was spend time in prayer. He fasted and prayed for months. When I heard these words, I sat down and wept. I mourned for a number of days, fasting and praying before the God of the heavens. I said, Lord, the God of the heavens, the great and awe-inspiring God who keeps his gracious covenant with those who love him and keep his commands. Let your eyes be open and your ears be attentive to hear your servant's prayer that I now pray to you day and night for your servants, the Israelites. I confess the sins we have committed against you. Both I and my father's family have sinned. We have acted corruptly toward you and have not kept the commands, statutes, and ordinances you gave your servant Moses. Please remember what you commanded your servant Moses. If you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the peoples. But if you return to me and carefully observe my commands, even though your exiles were banished to the farthest horizon, I will gather them from there and bring them to the place where I chose to have my name dwell. They are your servants and your people. You redeemed them by your great power and strong hand. Please, Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to that of your servants who delight to revere your name. Give your servant success today and grant him compassion in the presence of this man. At the time, I was the king's cupbearer. There are 3 things I notice in these verses. First, Nehemiah didn't ask God for step-by-step instructions. He knew God wanted him to lead the charge to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, and that was enough. He didn't say, I'll just sit here and wait for you to tell me what to do next. He started planning. Second, by the time he reached the end of his prayer, Nehemiah was already working on his plan. He asked God to help him be successful in what he was about to attempt. And then, I was cupbearer to the king. This is helpful information for us to know, but I think it has another purpose. It shows us that Nehemiah was making note of the resources God had already given him. As cupbearer for the king, he had access and influence with the most powerful person in the kingdom. To sum it up, you could say Nehemiah planned while he prayed. Let's look at chapter 2. During the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was set before him, I took the wine and gave it to the king. I had never been sad in his presence, so the king said to me, "Why do you look so sad when you aren't sick? This is nothing but sadness of heart." I was overwhelmed with fear and replied to the king, "May the king live forever. Why should I not be sad when the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire?" Then the king asked me, "What is your request?" So I prayed to the God of the heavens and answered the king, "If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor with you, send me to Judah and to the city where my ancestors are buried, so that I may rebuild it." The king, with the queen seated beside him, asked me, "How long will your journey take, and when will you return?" So I gave him a definite time, and it pleased the king to send me. I also said to the king, "If it pleases the king, let me have letters written to the governors of the region west of the Euphrates River, so that they will grant me safe passage until I reach Judah. And let me have a letter written to Asaph, keeper of the king's forest, so that he will give me timber to rebuild the gates of the temple's fortress, the city wall, and the home where I will live." The king granted my requests, for the gracious hand of my God was on me. I went to the governors of the region west of the Euphrates and gave them the king's letters. The king had also sent officers of the infantry and cavalry with me. So be honest, you're probably thinking, why are we reading all these boring details? If you are, please stick with me. In these verses, we discover Nehemiah hadn't just been praying and casually planning. He'd been preparing in great detail. The king asked Nehemiah why he looked sad, and he had an answer prepared. The king asked what Nehemiah wanted, and he had a request prepared. The king wanted to know how long Nehemiah's journey would take, and he had a timeline prepared. And since the king seemed pretty open to his ideas, Nehemiah also had a list of requests prepared. Throughout this process, Nehemiah continued to talk to God in prayer, but he didn't wait for God to do all the work. He used the strategic mind God gave him to plan and prepare while waiting for the right opportunity. Because Nehemiah had prepared in detail for the opportunity he hoped he would get to speak with the king, when God arranged the perfect moment, Nehemiah was fully prepared to take advantage of it. To sum it up, Nehemiah prepared while he planned. So Nehemiah already had a plan in place, but now it was time to recruit others to help him make it happen. But first, he'd need to figure out how to deal with the people who definitely didn't want to help. Let's keep going in chapter 2. When Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official heard that someone had come to pursue the prosperity of the Israelites, they were greatly displeased. After I arrived in Jerusalem and had been there 3 days, I got up at night and took a few men with me. I didn't tell anyone what my God had laid on my heart to do for Jerusalem. The only animal I took was the one I was riding. I went out at night through the valley gate toward the Serpent's Well and the Dung Gate, and I inspected the walls of Jerusalem that had been broken down and its gates that had been destroyed by fire. I went on to the Fountain Gate and the King's Pool, but farther down it became too narrow for my animal to go through. So I went up at night by way of the valley and inspected the wall. Then heading back, I entered through the valley gate and returned. The officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing, for I had not yet told the Jews, priests, nobles, officials, or the rest of those who would be doing the work. So I said to them, "You see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins and its gates have been burned. Come, let's rebuild Jerusalem's wall so that we will no longer be a disgrace." I told them how the gracious hand of my God had been on me and what the king had said to me. They said, "Let's start rebuilding," and their hands were strengthened to do this good work. When Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite official, and Geshem the Arab heard about this, they mocked and despised us and said, "What is this you're doing? Are you rebelling against the king?" I gave them this reply: "The God of the heavens is the one who will grant us success. We, his servants, will start building, but you have no share, right, or historic claim in Jerusalem." Now, Nehemiah gained a couple of enemies during this process. When you're working on a God-sized goal, that usually happens. But once again, he was ready. He wasn't naive. He expected people to oppose him. He knew to hold his tongue and keep his plans a secret from the people who opposed him. He was wise about who he trusted. He figured out a way to bypass the people who opposed him so he could recruit people who shared his vision for this God-sized goal. He surrounded himself with the right people. God gave Nehemiah a huge task to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. But he also gave Nehemiah everything he needed to make it happen. Nehemiah had access to God through prayer. He had his God-given talents, abilities, and passions. He had the resources, opportunities, and connections that God had given him. And he had other people. Although Nehemiah's God-sized goal probably scared and overwhelmed him sometimes, he didn't give up or wait around for someone else to handle it. Instead, Nehemiah made a plan. Although his goal was extraordinary, he understood the tools he would need to accomplish that goal were ordinary and already available to him. So Nehemiah took the vision God had given him, the skills God had given him, and the resources God had given him, and he got to work. He trusted that accomplishing this God-sized goal was exactly what he was made to do. And just like Nehemiah, you are designed for God-sized goals too. Think about one big goal you've achieved. You got it? Good. I don't know how you achieve your goal, but here's what I do know. You were able to achieve it because God designed you to do big things. You have a brain that can strategize, people who can help you, and skills and resources you can use to see your goals accomplished. If you're not sure what to think about God right now, or you're not sure if you have any God-sized goals, that's okay. What I'm going to share with you can still help you achieve whatever goals you have. If your goals right now are all about what you want to do or achieve for yourself, the story of Nehemiah can teach you some important wisdom that will help you achieve your goals no matter what they are. But I want to challenge you to think bigger than that. God designed you to do big things, even bigger than getting into college or making the soccer team. Chase after your goals, but don't settle for goals that only benefit you. Like we talked about last week, try asking God what else you might be designed to do, because God has big plans for you. God-sized plans. If you think you might have a God-sized goal growing in your heart, that's great. Maybe you wrote something down last week and you've been thinking about it ever since. Either way, there are 4 things I can see in Nehemiah's story that I think can help us turn our God-sized goals into a plan of action. God designed you just like he designed Nehemiah, with everything you need to accomplish the goals that he puts in your heart. You have you. We all have days when we feel insecure about who we are or what we can do, but God designed you with care, intention, and purpose. When God gives you a God-sized goal, ask, what do I bring to the table? How can I contribute? You have a mind that can think, plan, and strategize. A unique blend of skills, experience, and knowledge. And you have God-given interests and passions. You also have others. Just like Nehemiah discovered, most God-sized goals can't be achieved alone. There's a lot we can accomplish on our own, but if we want to make lasting change, we're going to need other people. When God gives you a God-sized goal, ask, who can I work with? You have friends and family, trusted adults, teachers, coaches, and mentors, access to knowledge from experts through books, videos, and the internet, access to influential people who can help make things happen, either in person or online. You have things. Just like Nehemiah needed transportation, wood, letters, and the king's blessing, you're probably going to need some things to help you accomplish your God-sized goals. When God gives you a God-sized goal, ask, what do I need and where can I get it? Everyone's God-sized goals will need different things. Maybe for you, it's money, supplies, an audience, maybe a location or a platform or an opportunity. And you've got God. Most importantly, you have the Lord. Whether your goal is an everyday you-sized goal or a once-in-a-lifetime God-sized goal, God is with you, just like God was with Nehemiah. Like Nehemiah, God probably isn't going to give you a step-by-step plan for achieving your God-sized goals. But that's okay, you don't need one, because you already have everything you need. Like Nehemiah, you are designed for God-sized goals. You've got the bricks. What will you build?